The Curse of the Marionette. Adrian Cole was a skilled but struggling puppeteer. Despite his intricate designs and captivating performances, he was having a hard time drawing in crowds, and every month felt like a fight just to keep his little theater running. But no matter how tough things got, he refused to give up on his passion. One chilly evening, after yet another show with a disappointing turnout, Adrian decided to take a walk to clear his head. He wandered through the dark, quiet streets, hands stuffed in his pockets, until he found himself standing in front of an old, abandoned theater. The faded sign above the door read The Silver Curtain. Adrian had heard about it before, a place that used to be famous for its grand shows decades ago, until it mysteriously shut down. As he was about to turn back, something caught his eye. The door was slightly ajar, creaking open as if inviting him inside. Curiosity got the best of him, and he pushed the door open further, stepping into the musty, dark lobby. Dust particles danced in the beams of his flashlight as he moved deeper into the theater, past rows of torn seats and faded posters. He reached the stage and stopped, his light sweeping across the empty space. That's when he saw it, a marionette lying in the corner, almost hidden under a pile of tattered curtains. It was unlike any puppet he had ever seen. The craftsmanship was exquisite, down to the delicate joints and the realistic expressions on its painted face. The marionette was dressed in a tiny suit, with deep-set eyes that seemed to follow him as he moved closer. Without thinking, Adrian picked it up, brushing off the dust. The marionette felt oddly warm in his hands, and he could swear it was heavier than it looked. Intrigued, he decided to take it home, hoping it might inspire something new for his shows. Back at his small apartment, Adrian placed the marionette on his workbench and studied it. The details were mesmerizing. Each finger was carefully carved, each strand of hair meticulously painted. It was a masterpiece, clearly the work of a true artist. He felt an odd connection to it, as if it was meant to find its way to him. That night, he placed it on a shelf and went to bed, already thinking about how he could incorporate it into his next show. Round midnight, Adrian was woken by a faint, rhythmic tapping. He groggily sat up, listening. It was coming from the workroom. Heart pounding, he grabbed a flashlight and slowly made his way to the door. As he stepped inside, the light flickered on, and his breath caught in his throat. The marionette was no longer on the shelf. It was standing in the middle of the room, its strings hanging loose, but its head tilted as if it was looking straight at him. Adrian laughed nervously, trying to convince himself it must have been his imagination. Maybe he'd left it there without realizing. But as he approached it, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The marionette's hand was pointing towards a stack of old sketches on his desk, designs he'd been working on for new characters. Its tiny, wooden fingers were curled around one of the sketches, as if it had been rifling through them. He quickly put the marionette back on the shelf and shut the door behind him. It took a while for him to fall asleep that night, and when he did, he had strange, vivid dreams of the marionette performing on stage, its movements smooth and lifelike, as if it was dancing without strings. Over the next few days, Adrian tried to brush off the unsettling experience, telling himself he was just tired. But things started getting stranger. Every morning, he'd find the marionette in a different position, sometimes even in a different room. Once, it was sitting on his couch, its head turned towards the TV, as if it had been watching. Despite the unease creeping up on him, Adrian found himself strangely drawn to the marionette. He started practicing with it, trying out new routines, and to his surprise, the puppet moved more smoothly than anything he'd worked with before. It was almost as if it anticipated his movements, making his performances feel effortless. Word started to spread about his shows, and more people began to come, intrigued by this new marionette that seemed to have a life of its own. But the more he performed with it, the more the strange occurrences escalated. Adrian began to hear whispers late at night, faint murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. One evening, as he was practicing a routine, he heard a soft voice, clear as day, say, "Let me dance." He froze, looking around the empty room. The voice wasn't his imagination. It was real, and it had come from the marionette. Terrified but unable to stop himself, he picked up the strings and began to move it. The marionette's limbs flowed with a grace that felt impossible, as if it was no longer just a puppet. It was leading him, guiding his hands. Adrian watched, mesmerized, as it twirled and bowed, moving with a precision and fluidity he had never seen. When the routine ended, the marionette slowly turned its head to face him. Its lips parted slightly, and in a voice that was soft yet commanding, it whispered, "One more show." Adrian couldn't sleep that night. He knew there was something wrong, something unnatural about the marionette, but he also knew that his shows had never been better. The marionette had brought him fame, attention, and success he'd never dreamed of. But at what cost? He decided to dig into the history of the old theater, hoping to find answers. What he found was chilling. Decades ago, the Silver Curtain was run by a man named Victor Kane, a brilliant but obsessive puppeteer. He had been known for his lifelike performances, but rumors swirled that he was involved in dark, occult practices. His final show was supposed to be his greatest masterpiece, but on opening night, he vanished without a trace, and the theater closed down shortly after. Adrian's heart sank as he read the old articles. There were whispers of a curse, of a spirit trapped in a puppet, longing to complete its final act. The more he read, the more he realized that the marionette he had found wasn't just a puppet. It was Victor's creation, and somehow, it was still carrying out its master's last and finished performance. The next night, Adrian returned to the theater, marionette in hand. He stood on the empty stage, the air thick with silence. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice echoing through the darkness. The marionette's head lifted, and in that same eerie voice, it replied, "One final act. Set me free." Adrian hesitated, but he knew there was no turning back. He picked up the strings, and as he did, the marionette began to move. Its dance was hauntingly beautiful, a graceful, sorrowful performance that seemed to tell a story of longing and regret. Adrian's hands moved, but he was no longer in control. The marionette was. As it finished its dance, the marionette slowly came to a stop, its head bowed, its body still. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the strings went limp, and the marionette collapsed to the floor. Adrian picked it up, expecting to feel that same strange warmth, but it was cold, lifeless. Whatever had been animating it was gone. He left the marionette on the stage and walked out of the theater, the weight of what had happened heavy on his shoulders. The next morning, when he returned, the marionette was gone. The Silver Curtain's doors were sealed shut, and no matter how hard he tried, Adrian could never open them again. His shows continued, but without the marionette, they were never quite the same. He realized that Victor's spirit had been set free, but a part of him wondered if, somewhere, the puppet was still out there, waiting for its next performance.